Welcome everyone, this is Dr. Mercola, and today I'm here with Jim Navarro, and we have a very emotional and compelling story to share with you, and I want to thank you, Jim, for coming. For those of you who don't know who Jim is the father of Thomas Navarro, and he was the young boy who had a battle against cancer, against the medical monopoly, and it received national attention a few years ago and initiated a new legislation being written to protect patient rights. And Thomas's story is featured in the film Cut, Poison, Burn, which we've had on the website and has been available for viewing. Now, when your son Thomas was diagnosed with a brain cancer, specifically medulloblastoma, at 4 years old, your wife Donna did all the research, and they objected. You both objected to the conventional treatment, and you chose to seek alternative treatment options that would lead to less invasive, less damaging, and life-threatening approaches. So in the weeks and months that followed, you went actually to hiding to keep your son away from the authorities so they would take him from you, and you actually fought for the right for alternative treatment for months or years, and you sought to use Dr. Brzezinski's anti-neoplastin treatment, but were prevented from using it.
Correct.
With the threat of taking your child away from you. And then finally, after all the legal works and process and expenses, you received approval, but at that point it was too late, and your son lost his battle with cancer after 6 years. You've been, since that time, championing the legislation and patient rights acts, and so to prevent this tragic injustice occurring from other families and scenarios. So I want to thank you for your courageous efforts and actions, and really thank you for coming here today to share with us some of your experiences on that. So
you're very welcome.
Appreciate that. Now, can you let us know why did you opt out for the conventional treatment for alternative treatment instead of the conventional approaches?
Sure. First of all, I want to go on record as saying I have no medical background, and I was, as my wife would say, as dumb as a box of rocks. But she had the medical background, being a combat medic in the military. And she told me right off the bat, I've seen this too many times on base. Chemotherapy is a cytotoxic poison, radiation, obviously a weapons-grade material, and no good can come of it. So she was actually the pioneer that said we have to find something outside the box that will keep our son alive. So as she started doing research, I followed shortly thereafter, but my focus was on, once we determine his disease, because to be honest with you, doctor, in the beginning I could neither pronounce or spell medulloblastoma, and I can do it backwards now. I started looking for chat rooms and forums, and that's actually how I found Brzezinski, because what I was looking for, my focus was on the fact that they said there are no known survivors. So the first thing I Googled in was survivors of medulloblastoma. So as I found these chat rooms, the common denominator was there was always mention of a Dr. Brzezinski, Dr. Brzezinski. So then I started looking him up to determine where he was, and obviously in the beginning, Texas, we lived in Arizona. I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a long run. I had called, and the very first thing they told me was, I'm sorry, but you can't bring your son here. And it's like, what? Said, you don't understand, the FDA won't allow us to treat him. And according to the protocols, he has to first go through radiation, chemo, and fail, and have recurrent tumor. And until then, he can't qualify. I said, okay, I'll see you in a couple days. And just hung up. And so when we showed up, it's like, Mr. Navarro, why are you guys here? We told you you couldn't come. I said, I know. I'm here for a physical, a well baby check, and then you are going to put in writing that you're refusing treatment and why. I'm beginning his file to his journey, because at a point it's going to get really ugly and very legal. And I wanted that paper trail to substantiate what we were doing.
So you started the process, and then as well documented in the film, and we're going to expand on some of the details here. Can you describe your interactions with the film and how that came about?
That was a long adventure all by itself. It started initially, of course, we were in the beginning weeks and months of Thomas's illness, and my wife called me from Mexico because she was already there with the boys at a clinic down there. and I was still in Washington preparing to testify before Congress on pediatric cancer. So she called and said, Jim, I've met this filmmaker and he wants to follow us and document our case and tell the story and blah, blah, blah. And I said, thanks, but no thanks. Hollywood, no thanks. So she kept trying to wear me down with phone calls, and when I finally caught up with him in Mexico, I sat down with him at that time, and he kept insisting that, you know, Thomas was a very unusual child because he was an old soul. You know, he would sit and say, well, how are you? How's your family? Like news, weather, and sports, not like, can I pass the crayons? And so finally I threw in the towel and said, okay, we'll do it. However, we have full editorial right. It has to be absolutely honest and truthful, because this is a very dangerous subject in my book, and I don't want to do anything misleading that could cause another harm in the process of misleading them, thinking, you know, that this therapy works or that therapy works, when in fact I have no clue because I've never participated. So the filming was done. They followed us through what ended up being a 26.5 months journey with Thomas before he passed away. And then it just kind of disintegrated. Bad went to worse. There were issues with the filmmaker, and he never made it. So I ended up having to go to court to get my film back. And it was my film, even though he paid for it, because of the intrusion of you with the promise of making a film were a part of my life. That was kind of like real TV. I mean, when we laughed, when we cried, when we fought, when the kids were brushing their teeth or heading into the bathroom, there was a camera. Because they wanted to show the journey, what a child's battle with cancer was like. So long story short, we ended up meeting a new film crew at the 30-year gala for Dr. Brzezinski. They reapproached us. We want to make a film. And it's like, yeah, I've heard that before. And it's like, no, really, we want to make a film. And they were already in the process of making one. And so it became like an amalgam where Thomas became the spine of it. And in, what, a year, a little less than a year, they were done. And I'm like, whoa.
Did they actually integrate film from the first filmmaker?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. There's, and the irony is I still have probably 2.5 years worth of film vaulted, because there's so many things in the film, to be honest with you. Like I was approached by a director of the FDA before my first congressional hearing in the hallway outside the hearing room, saying, Mr. Navarro, I'm authorized to make a deal with you. If you don't go in and testify, we'll approve Thomas for treatment. And of course, it was caught on film, them not realizing I was being hounded by a crew, and said, sorry, it's too late. It's not about my son anymore. It's about the hundreds you are killing on a daily basis by denying them access to therapies that work. So it's on.
And your wife was in Mexico at that time?
Yes.
And what was she doing in Mexico?
Going to a clinic. Again, my wife is the pioneer medical genius in our family, thinking outside the box. She was pursuing whatever worked. And of course, Tijuana is famous for cancer clinics. And had found one that was successful until you've heard of insulin therapy, where they
insubstantiation.
Yes. That's why you're the doctor and I'm not. It was going great right up to the end when one of the nurses was remiss, forgot one of the ingredients, and instead decided she'd like to save her job, substitute. And what she substituted with was basically like putting pure sugar into the mix, and boom, he had a reaction, and just within days he went recurrent, and the tumor was getting big, and that's what brought about the second brain surgery, which occurred at Beth Israel in New York.
Now, you had mentioned that FDA official that approached you in Washington prior to your testimony, that would have allowed Thomas to receive treatment earlier, I would assume.
Yeah, we were only in the battle probably 2-3 months after his diagnosis, so that would have been plenty of time.
So if you had agreed to that and refused to testify, there's likelihood that Thomas might still be here today? Or?
Yeah. Well,
Well,
and don't get me started there, because there's a lot of things and things that weren't seen in the film that you don't know. For example, you were correct when you said that it was a long and arduous battle. 18 months is how long it got to get approved, and that was at 18 months. He'd already had a second brain surgery. He'd already been forced into chemotherapy in New York. He'd already gone recurrent from that. And what people don't know is once he began the anti-neoplastic therapy with Brzezinski, before dying, it not only extended his life another 7 months, but he had a 33% reduction of tumors. So a father's hope is, had he not been polluted and poisoned with chemotherapy, had we not been stopped, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that he would be alive today.
So it's just a travesty. It's just such an incredibly depraved system that existed, and if our founding fathers,
It's perverted.
they'd be turning over in their graves most
Yeah.
likely, because you know what has developed now to allow this type of travesty to exist. So there are three primary organizations that are responsible for this persisting. One would be the FDA, the American Cancer Society, and the National Cancer Institute. So, and then the Child Service System.
Absolutely.
So you've got four actually. So what would you change in all those four organizations, and why? And then how would you change it?
Well, and you're not going to like my answers, I would absolutely, to begin with, get rid of the American Cancer Society. To me, it's just people creating jobs for themselves to be paid by the taxpayers. And let's talk downsizing of government. FDA can go the way of the white buffalo. And they all can in my book. Because what's happening is we don't need an FDA. That's why you're a doctor. I come to you because I trust you with the welfare of my family. Why do I need a bunch of professional bureaucrats in Washington who don't even know my son? They've never seen my son, and they're going to make his life and death decisions? They're not even, for the most part, a number of the medical practitioners. You know, I'm old enough to remember when I was a child, I loved my doctor. He was my buddy. Had nothing to do with the fact that he made me airplanes out of tongue depressors to entertain me while he was checking me out. But there was a level of trust that, in my opinion, doesn't exist anymore in America. We've become morally bankrupt. The dollar has become our god in so many ways. And it's pervasive in corporate America. They're willing to poison us for the sake of making a buck. And it's medicine, no offense. It's in food. Again, I'm old enough to remember all the girls in junior high and high school look like olive oil. They don't anymore. And what do we have as we've accelerated the physical development of young women? You've got ovarian cancer, breast cancer, uterine cancer at tender young ages, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, testicular cancer in young boys as early as 10. And it's a result of the growth hormones and the steroids and the dyes and the chemicals that do what? Oh, I'm sorry, it's not about our health. It's about making it last longer on the shelf to guarantee we turn that buck. And that's evil. It's evil. I'm bent on that. It's evil. It's
specifically the American Cancer Society, which has been around for a number of decades now and really hasn't produced any significant results other than garnered tens of billions of dollars. And
if you remember your history, when I first testified before Congress, the very day I went before Congress back in 2000, that year they had made, I believe it was $553 or $556 million they'd taken in. The federal agents were in Europe arresting 3 of their top people who had $8 million in cash that they had embezzled from the fund. So it's not about trying to help people, trying to cure cancer. They've got their money machine.